Today, if you ask yourself, what does Nigeria produce? The Nigeria only elite, not the country itself. Of course, we have natural resources, unearned income, and that is the extraction, that the Nigerian elite do, and they do it with the help of expatriates. They don't contribute anything to it, and so we receive rents. That rent is what the ruling elite share, and so they share it in their own interest, not to the benefit of the larger society. And so when the population reacts, then you then see what we call the code aspect of the state, which is why sometimes we refer to the state as the coldest of all cold things. The first shock that we received in Nigeria that engendered what we now call brain drain was in the 70s, when the military, decided to increase, tuition fee in the educational sector. And the Nigerian academics resisted it. And so what you had was the prosecution of Nigerian intellectuals. People like Edrimadu, Dr. Olaomi of blessed memory, all of them left UI. They left the educational system. A few of them went abroad. So we were to suffer a second shock in the 80s, in the mid-80s, when the so-called structural adjustment program was introduced. In fact, that policy was even meant to castrate the higher institutions in Nigeria. The structure of the Nigerian state that has engendered 3 shocks that we call, brain drain. A new colony is usually a weak state, considered in the context of other advanced countries or the ex-white colonizers. That's what we mean by a weak state. And the ruling elites in those states are usually, managing the country or governing the country on the basis of received policies from those other countries. So it is in that context you understand it.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me? All right. So again, thank you to the Nigeria International Book Fair for inviting me. So I guess my context, even though I was introduced as an activist, I'm not here in that capacity. I'm actually here because I'm a campus child. I grew up on the campus of the University of Ife. And watching what Ife has become over the last, 3 decades is quite painful. It's quite painful as a campus child. But I wanted to show something, if you can. While he's setting that up, I will continue talking. So I think Prof has helped in terms of putting it into context. So for a certain generation, people leaving Nigeria is new. was for me what university was and what university life was. It was a childhood. I tell people that Ife has only two things: the university and the Oni's palace. There's nothing else in the town. But we grew up in a time where we believed we could do anything and be anybody. So I tell people that I didn't grow up in Lagos, didn't grow up in a city, but I grew up very confident that there was nobody in the world that I couldn't compete with. I grew up in Ife. Fast forward 30 years, there's no child that goes to staff school now that can say the same thing because the times have changed. And I like the context that Prof provided in terms of the shocks that have happened. So Japa or people leaving or immigrating is nothing new. Anywhere, everywhere around the world, people leave for different opportunities. Right now in Nigeria today, there's certain things that people would want to study that because of the nature of our curriculum and our lack of facilities, you cannot study it. Robotics and a few other things, just because we don't have the capacity for you to be the fullness of who you want to be. So if you want to study those things, you have to leave the country. There are doctors in terms of the areas of specialization and things that, in terms of advanced study and research and innovation, that they have to leave the country to have access to those things because they've done the research, they have ideas, they want to test it out, but Nigeria makes it very difficult. The context that Prof also provided, which I think is really critical, is that if we look at education in Nigeria, it's not just about tertiary education. The people that enter the universities, recently we're discussing JAM scores and whatnot, are a function of the primary school and the secondary school that they attended. I was very impressed by the young ladies and the young man who recited their poem. To be honest, their diction surprised me. When they opened their mouth and spoke, I was like, oh, wow. But after the process of enters university starts from there. So primary school, secondary school, and then university. We now start talking about the challenges of our university. Now, if as a country, as far back as when IBB was president, he said, to quote you, that professors are teaching what they are not supposed to teach. What are you not supposed to teach in the world of academia? But if you are under military rule, there's certainly some things you are not supposed to talk about. So if we think about it, that for as far back as 30 years, we've had governments in place that were threatened by academia. Now, if academia threatens you, you will undermine it. You will not fund it appropriately, and you will find ways to ensure that the quality continues to decline so that the output continues to decline. And in my view, that's where we are. And I'll land by saying, while government has that part, I'll blame government very squarely with that. But I would also say academia hasn't helped their matter. And my question is simply, if you know someone doesn't want to fund you or doesn't have your best interest at heart, why do you keep going back to him for funding? I say this all the time. Universities in Nigeria should be independent. They should have asked for autonomy years ago. Because as long as the federal government continues to fund universities in Nigeria, you will never, and I say that unequivocally, never have enough money. You will never have enough money. You will protest incessantly, go on strike incessantly, they will come to the negotiating table, you will ask for 100 million, they'll give you 10, and you'll be like, okay, let's go back because the 90 is still coming. The 90 will never come. 2 years later, there'll be another protest, you'll get another 10. And I think the academians in the room smiling, because that's the pattern we've seen over the last 30 years. So I now say, if we're the intelligent ones, if we're the intellectuals, and we haven't figured out this game yet over the last 40 years, and they continue to play us like this, yet we complain about the state of our education. And I'll end with this. There's a picture. There's the picture, just a slide. You see a picture, and I'll end with that. That when academics or intellectuals, keep going, keep going, this is Leventis at the Obafemi Awolowo. As a child, we used to go here. This was our supermarket on campus. Like, this was, I don't know, ShopRite, context. This was when I was growing up. This is what it looks like now. This is what it looks like now. So government has its flaws, and I agree with Prof 100%, but academics, intellectuals need to think a little bit deeper about what they really want. Thank you.
Right. The point is this. There's this reservoir of hope that Nigerians in the diaspora, have now constituted an enormous, human capital, efficient human capital that we can have, back in the country. They can come back and rebuild our country. But the point is, do we have a structural equilibrium that will allow them to come back to this country? They will not come back for a very long time. Insofar as we have the present, class of governing elites in the country, they will not come back. Let me give you an example. If you don't understand the state of insecurity in this country to me, if you understand it, you will understand what I'm going to say. Between Lokoja and Okene, in the last 6 years, we've lost about 7 generals shot by bandits on the way, generals in the army. And that gives you a sense of scale of the insecurity in this country. And so, that stock of human capital that we have in the diaspora, they are not going to come back, so soon. Of course, the diaspora transfer, is something very attractive. But even at that, we say so because of the exchange rate, difference. That's why we are saying so. I do know in late 1990s, many Nigerians in Europe and America wanted to come back home. Because the exchange rate, the difference was just little. Now, because it's about 1.4 now, and you almost rose to 1.9 and the rest of it, you think that when you change it, in economics, that's what they call purchasing power parity. It works for the developed economics, but it doesn't work here. You know why? At the back of my house, I have plantain. And each time the fruits I harvest it, it's not part of my income. You don't calculate it. I run to my extended family network. In fact, I have a cousin, I still wear his clothes. Even till now, we grew up together. We are still close. You don't have those things in abroad. You work 24/7 to earn your dollars. And you pay bills. I school there, I know what I'm talking about. And so, it's not just, those things are there, they exist in the abstract. Here, there is a huge diaspora transfer. When it comes here, what happens to that money? You can't invest because the economy, the state of the economy is hostile. The fundamentals are not there. So that's it. And if the chairman, the moderator will permit me, I need to take a shot at my sister here. Funding crisis. My argument is always this. Education is a public good, not a private good. Then secondly, tell me what the role the Nigerian state is playing. If you can give me the role it is playing, then I would then say perhaps it can advocate funding of education. Thank you.
I completely agree with you. Education is a public good 100%. But I'll go to the moderator's point, primary and secondary. And the Constitution is also clear. The Constitution says the federal government shall fund tertiary education if it can afford it. Now, we can have a whole debate on if Nigeria is rich or not rich, if Nigeria has money or doesn't have money. But the truth of the matter is, if you take a backward elite, as you call them, who are not interested in an intellectual class that can challenge them, as Prof has said, there is no incentive for them to fund tertiary education. And you then see that even more clearly because they are not funding primary nor secondary education. I'm also a product of a unity school. I will not send my children, and neither would any of my friends who went to unity schools, none of them, including I'm sure everybody sitting here and those sitting in the audience. At a very basic level, all Nigerians will be literate and be able to literally function. You can then go into a vocational school or go into a tertiary or a university. Number two, because we also have elevated the value of a university certificate, regardless of the quality, we're also not encouraging young people to look into the vocational space. As a country, we're not doing it, but young people are finding expressions on their own. So event planners, makeup artists, because again, the creative sector has provided an avenue for expression. So if we're talking about people fulfilling their purpose, people in a sense, as we say, living their best lives, a university degree is not a necessity. So the way we've elevated it is also part of the problem because we've made it a be-all and end-all. To your point about remittances, sir, I quite agree. But the difference is, where do the remittances go? The remittances go, as Prof has said, not for investment, to pay for rent, to pay for private primary school education, private secondary school education. So as a country, we don't see the impact of it. Now, in terms of people coming back, there's an intentionality that needs to also accompany that in addition to structural issues. When President Obasanjo was in office, he was very intentional about wooing Nigerians in the diaspora and talking about providing an enabling environment, and Nigerians came back. And they came back in droves. The banking sector was taking off then, entrepreneurship was a big thing. But right now, what is it that you're going to sell in Nigeria to come back to? Maybe we're saying they're going now and they'll come back in 10 years. But for that 10 years to become a reality, we must be intentional as a country, as a people, around developing our country. As a Nigerian citizen, I cannot say that I have clarity about what Nigeria's national plan is. Where are we going? Like, what is the vision? If you ask any of the students at the back, I would love to hear it. Does anybody have a sense of what our national vision is? What we're in 2024, as a Nigerian in 2050, that's even far. In 2030, 2035, 2040, what is the Nigeria that I see? What is the Nigeria that I hope to be living in? A Nigeria that we're not queuing for fuel anymore, a Nigeria where private or public schools are back to their glory days, people can afford education. What is the Nigeria that we see? And I think I'll end on that in terms of universities and diaspora remittances. One of the things that our universities have not done well is harness the power of their alumni. I have spoken to 3 different university vice chancellors in the Southwest. I won't name them, not to embarrass them. And I've given them clear strategies in how to use your alumni to get money. I'm in 2 WhatsApp groups of IFE alumni because we loved our childhood. Now, I didn't go to IFE deliberately because I've grown up there. I didn't want to see my father's friends as my lecturers, so I decided to go to UNILAG instead. But there are alumni groups of staff schools or university campuses, the university campuses themselves, who do things together, Mr. Mama just talked about the gentleman who was president of the University of Calabar Alumni Association. They exist everywhere, and I'll end with this. They exist everywhere, both locally and internationally. There is no university. Ibadan tried it under Gamaliel Onosodi. I'm not sure if it's still there. But I do not know of any university in Nigeria today, of the public universities, who is intentional about courting its alumni and has a database of alumni that gets them money. I know UNILAG is also trying something. Harvard University, you need to go for a course that's 2 hours. You didn't get a degree, you went for a 2-hour course. They will kill you with communication. They will update on email, newsletter, brochure, donate here, we're raising money for this. You become a part of their database that they continuously come back to for help and resources. For all the people that graduated from IFE, all the people that graduated from any of your first generation universities that are in the diaspora, if their remittances are targeted to rebuild their universities and improve the quality of their universities to where it was when they were there, universities will be amazed at the amount of money that will come in. Thank you.
Sure, many of us sitting here, especially we are not going to go anywhere, irrespective of what the problem is. But if you take a comparative perspective, yes, there's a lot of insecurity. You may not be able to move around from city to another without the fear that there might be bandits, there might be armed robbers. But even if you go to Europe, a few days ago, the Nigerian was stabbed with a sword on the street. There has been at least 6-7 reports in the last few months of school shooting in the United States. Somebody just gets his dad's rifle
goes inside the classroom, shoots down the teacher who annoyed him yesterday, and things like that. We talked about condition of living. There are no earthquakes in this place. There are no extremes of weather. I mean, he has a banana behind his window. He probably just threw the seed and the thing started growing. Israel, Saudi Arabia, complete desert. They have to do a lot. Irrigation and not. But here in Nigeria, God has given you everything. We have everything. The people we produce and in other places, people have mentioned that. And yet we are not realizing that in this country. We often say that we don't produce. It's not true. We produce a lot. Look around us in this room. The air conditioners here, maybe they assemble, but at least there's some addition to it. It didn't just start working like that. There must have been something we do here. Look at your dresses, your wristwatches, even your shoes, except the ones you buy when you travel. Some of the ones you buy here are made in Aba, it's just that they write made in Italy, and you use it. If you travel from here, and I was coming from here, within, after about 3 kilometers from the Badotoli, you start seeing factories left, right, and center. By the time you get to Shagamu, you see a lot more on both sides. They are not just on the sides of the road, far in. What are they doing in those factories? Are they just watching TV there? People are producing, but we don't see all this. It is the new structural adjustment program now that is creating new difficulties, that is driving people away from this country.
Because it is a leader that can set the pace for a conversation, a nation, a home, a community. But I also hear you about the role of followers. But what we forget is that followers emulate what they see and what is celebrated. Now, those of us, everybody in this room is part of the elite. Prof calls us a backward elite, but everybody in this room is part of Nigeria's elite. So we need to think about it out of, as you said, followers or people in high appointed or elected office. Or a leader is simply anybody that has influence. I'm a leader in my home because I have influence over things that happen in my house. I'm a leader in my office because I have influence over what happens in my office. So if we don't think about leadership in terms of appointed or elected office, but think about it in the context of people that have influence, all of us have influence. So it is and I think another lady made the point about expecting others to fix things or others to do the right thing. In our own spheres, look, nobody's going to fix Nigeria for us, and our leaders are not going to drop from the sky. As you rightly said, our leaders are a product of the environment. If we have leaders that we then don't hold accountable or feel that they cannot be held accountable, we have the problem that we have now. And I'll land with this. We're technically in a democracy, but there's nothing in our culture and our structure that teaches us the dynamics of a democracy. What makes a democracy better than any other form of government is that people have choice. So the person that I vote into office, I can also remove them from office. As they say, elections have consequences. So if we do not think about our leaders or our elected officials as people who we can hold accountable and don't engage them in that regard, the policies and the decisions that they make affect us negatively. And I'll land with the point that you made. You go to a local government office, people don't come to work. Let's think about that in the context of Nigeria. If you run a business here, how many people run businesses? Businesses, or you head teams? Businesses, I mean, they're booksellers events. Okay, I see that. Good. So you run a business or you run an office. You have a team. On Monday, everybody comes to work. On Tuesday, your staff stroll in at maybe noon. By 2 o'clock, they're gone. On Wednesday, they don't come to work at all. On Thursday, all this not coming to work, coming in late. There's no phone call, there's no information. They just scroll in and scroll out as they will. On Thursday, they leave early. The one going to mosque is going to mosque. The one going to camp is going to camp. And by 12, your office has cleared. They do that every day, every week. And at the end of the month, their salary is complete. There's no query, there's no discussion, nothing. You do that in January, nothing happens. You do that in February, nothing happens. Do that in March, nothing happens. Now, if they're consistently do that and there's no consequence for their behavior, what is the incentive to do anything better? There's none. And that's the same thing of us and how we engage government. We have elected and appointed leaders in office who don't do their jobs that they are paid to do, that we pay them to do. And we don't hold them accountable. But yet we sit in fora like this and complain about what is, what could be, what should be, what may be. We all have a responsibility to this project, Nigeria. So if we are not ready to do the work, then let's all be clear that this is what we're going to have. It's not changing anytime soon.